The thing about military assessments, conducted by decorated officers with decades of tactical experience and backed by sophisticated sensor arrays capable of detecting molecular variants from 3 astronomical units away, is that they're supposed to be absolute, final. The kind of pronouncements carved into historical records with the weight of scientific certainty and strategic expertise combined. Planet Exarith 9 had received exactly such an assessment. The world hung in space like a broken promise, its atmosphere a sickly ochre swirl that made even hardened pilots grimace behind their viewport glass. 12 years of sustained combat had transformed what geological surveys suggested was once a marginally habitable rock into something that more closely resembled the universe's least appealing vacation destination. The Krillian Empire had fought the Vexnari Collective here for over a decade, each side pouring resources and bodies into a meat grinder that neither could afford but neither would abandon, because that's what happens when 2 aggressive species decide the same unremarkable planet represents strategic significance. The bunkers scattered across the scarred landscape told stories written in blast patterns and structural collapse. Atmospheric processors, those magnificent towers of technology designed to gradually make hostile worlds breathable, jutted from the ground at drunken angles, their innards gutted by artillery fire or simple neglect. The soil itself had achieved a unique consistency, part ash, part industrial runoff, part the kind of radiation saturation that made scanners weep. 3 separate mountain ranges had been leveled to their roots by orbital bombardment. The primary ocean had evaporated, leaving behind a basin of crystallized salt deposits and what might charitably be called extremely enthusiastic toxic sludge. General Vash'kor stood on what remained of forward operating base Crimson 7, his 4 eyes scanning the devastation with the particular weariness that comes from winning a war but losing any reasonable justification for having fought it. His carapace, decorated with 17 service commendations and 1 very impressive scar from the Battle of the Eastern Wastes, reflected the weak sunlight filtering through the compromised atmosphere. Behind him, 3 evacuation cruisers hummed in low orbit, their cargo holds packed with the last military personnel who'd been stationed on this forsaken ball of disappointment. Environmental analysis. He clicked to his second-in-command, a younger officer named Trenzik, who had the misfortune of being both competent and assigned to this particular disaster. Trenzik consulted his datapad with the expression of someone reading a particularly depressing obituary. Radiation levels exceed habitable parameters by factor of 7. Soil toxicity renders agriculture impossible without extensive remediation. We're talking minimum 50 standard cycles of treatment. Atmospheric processes are 93% non-functional. Water sources contaminated with industrial compounds, heavy metals, and something our scanners keep identifying as aggressive chemical spite. Tectonic instability has increased 40% due to sustained bombing campaigns. Seismic events predicted to continue for at least 3 decades. Conclusion: no sentient species could establish viable habitation here within 5 standard cycles, sir. Possibly 10. More realistically, never. This planet is done. Vash'kor absorbed this information with the satisfaction of a professional confirming what he already knew. He activated the emergency broadcast array, his voice carrying across every functional communication channel in this sector of space, as protocol demanded when officially abandoning military assets. This is General Vash'kor of the Krillian Imperial Fleet, broadcasting strategic assessment for planetary designation Exarith 9. Following comprehensive environmental analysis and tactical evaluation, this world is hereby classified as tactically unsalvageable. Surface conditions prohibit sustained habitation. Resource depletion is total. Infrastructure is beyond economical repair. Any attempt at colonization would constitute negligent endangerment of personnel and squandering of material. He paused, mandibles clicking with emphasis. This territory is formally abandoned under Military Code 773. All claims relinquished, all salvage rights waived. May whatever deity watches over empty rocks have mercy on this worthless piece of space debris. It was, all parties would later agree, a very thorough declaration of hopelessness. The general's fleet departed with the kind of relief usually reserved for escaping bad relationships and dental procedures. Behind them, Zereth 9 continued its melancholy rotation, unaware that it had been officially declared cosmically pointless by military authority. 3 months passed, in cosmic terms barely a blink. In bureaucratic terms, just enough time for the paperwork to process and everyone to forget why they'd cared about that particular planet in the first place. Then someone noticed the distress beacon had gone silent. This wouldn't have been particularly noteworthy. Distress beacons fail all the time, especially on abandoned war zones where the definition of functional equipment becomes increasingly philosophical. Except this particular beacon had been broadcasting faithfully for 8 months. Its automated signal, a sad little reminder that yes, this place still existed, and no, nobody should come here. Mid-transmission, it simply stopped. Command, displaying the kind of thorough attention to detail that generally characterizes large military bureaucracies, assumed equipment malfunction. The alternative, that something had actually happened on a planet declared unfit for sentient life, seemed laughably improbable. But protocols existed for exactly this kind of situation, written by people who assumed future personnel would exercise common sense, but wanted everything documented anyway. General Vash'kor received his orders with the enthusiasm of someone discovering spoiled food in their refrigerator. Return to Zereth 9. Investigate the silent beacon. File appropriate incident reports. His vacation time, carefully hoarded for the express purpose of not thinking about that cursed planet, evaporated like his career satisfaction. Sir, this is clearly a waste of resources. Trenzik offered helpfully as their small reconnaissance vessel broke from hyperspace at the system's edge. The beacon's power supply finally depleted. We'll confirm that from orbit, file the report, and be home for evening meal. Vash'kor appreciated the optimism. He'd learned, over 3 decades of military service, that the universe possessed a particular sense of humor that specifically targeted optimism. Zereth 9 appeared on their view screens, still looking like the universe's participation trophy for most aggressively uninhabitable. The ochre atmosphere swirled with familiar malevolence. The scarred surface reflected sunlight in unpleasant ways. Everything about it screamed, "Stay away," in frequencies both literal and metaphorical. Scanning for the beacon's last known position, their navigator reported, manipulating controls with practiced efficiency. Southern continent, former FOB Crimson 7, running detailed surface analysis now. A pause, then a longer pause, then the kind of pause that makes generals' mandibles clench. Navigate Officer Kreshtal report, Vash'kor ordered, his voice carrying the warning tone of someone whose patience had already been tested by this planet. Sir, I'm detecting anomalies. Elaborate. The beacon area shows signs of recent activity. Significant surface modification. Geometric patterns inconsistent with natural formation or combat damage. Heat signatures suggesting active power generation. And sir, the navigator's voice took on a note of confusion that no military scanner operator should ever display. I'm reading chlorophyll. Impossible. Confirm your equipment is functioning. Equipment is functioning perfectly, sir, which is why I'm extremely concerned about these readings. Vash'kor moved to the scanner display, his four eyes narrowing as data scrolled past. Chlorophyll. Plant life. On a planet where the soil was essentially poison and the atmosphere qualified as a war crime against respiration. He cross-referenced 3 different sensor systems, hoping for equipment malfunction. All 3 confirmed something green and photosynthesizing had taken root on Zerith 9. "Prepare landing shuttle," he ordered, mandibles clicking with the particular cadence that indicated someone was about to have a very strange day. Full environmental suits. Weapons ready. "If something has established presence here, I want to know what and how before we submit any reports that'll make us look collectively insane." The shuttle descended through atmosphere that hadn't improved since their departure 3 months prior. Wind patterns still suggested the planet was personally offended by the concept of stable weather. Surface temperatures remained aggressively hostile to comfort. The landing zone, carefully selected to avoid the worst radiation zones and unstable ground, brought them down half a kilometer from the former FOB Crimson 7. What they found made Vash'kor question whether his species' visual processing organs had malfunctioned simultaneously. Someone had cleared the land. Not casually, not accidentally, but with deliberate purpose and geometric precision. Fields stretched in organized rows, each approximately 15 meters wide, running perpendicular to what looked like irrigation channels. Irrigation channels. On a planet with no clean water and soil that could charitably be described as aggressively lethal to carbon-based life. Structures rose from the cleared areas, walls constructed from reclaimed military debris, support beams that Vash'kor recognized as repurposed bunker reinforcements, roofing that appeared to be salvaged from atmospheric processor housing. The architecture made no sense from an engineering standpoint, combining Krillian military design with something else entirely, something that prioritized function over aesthetics, and seemed built by someone who'd looked at condemned equipment and thought, but what if it worked differently? "Sir, those are hydroponic gardens," Trenzik said, voice flat with disbelief. He pointed to transparent structures containing rows of green plants, their leaves swaying gently in controlled air circulation. Someone built hydroponic gardens. From viewport glass and atmospheric recyclers. They followed the geometric patterns of cultivation and construction, their weapons drawn but increasingly forgotten as the sheer audacity of what they were witnessing overwhelmed tactical considerations. The settlement, because that's what this was, an actual settlement spread over nearly 2 square kilometers. Solar panel arrays, cobbled together from military-grade photovoltaic cells, tracked the sun with automated precision. Water purification systems hummed steadily, processing what scanners confirmed was legitimately potable water from sources that should have been toxic sludge. At the settlement's center, near what appeared to be a communal courtyard constructed in a former artillery crater, they found him. The human was approximately 1.8 meters tall, bipedal, wearing an environmental suit that had seen extensive repair and modification. Soil covered his gloved hands and streaked across his suit's torso section. He knelt beside a solar panel array, adjusting connection points with the focused attention of someone solving a moderately interesting puzzle. A toolkit lay open beside him, filled with instruments that ranged from professional-grade electronics equipment to what appeared to be a bent spoon. He noticed them approaching and straightened, offering a wave that suggested greeting rather than surrender. "Afternoon," the human called out, his voice carrying through the external suit speakers with remarkable cheer for someone on a planet declared uninhabitable. "Bit off the main shipping lanes, aren't you?" Vash'kor stared, then stared more deliberately, hoping additional observation would make reality make sense. It declined to cooperate. I am General Vash'kor of the Krillian Imperial Fleet. Identify yourself and explain your presence on this abandoned military territory." The human pulled off his helmet in atmosphere that required environmental protection, revealing features that suggested late biological middle age for his species. Dark hair, graying at the temples. Eyes crinkled with either permanent amusement or sun damage. Skin tanned from actual sun exposure. "Marcus Holloway," the human replied, extending a hand in what Vash'kor's cultural database identified as a gesture of greeting. When nobody moved to reciprocate, he shrugged and withdrew it. "Been here about 5 months now. Nice to see other people. Honestly, gets a bit quiet with just our group." "You've been here 5 months," Vash'kor repeated slowly, mandibles clicking each word with excessive precision, hoping that careful enunciation would make the statement less insane. "On this planet, Zereth 9. The planet I personally declared tactically unsalvageable 12 weeks ago." "Oh, that was you?" Marcus's face brightened with recognition. "Got that broadcast, yeah? Seemed a bit dramatic, honestly. I mean, it's rough, sure, but tactically unsalvageable feels harsh. The infrastructure alone is worth..." He paused, noticing their weapons. "Should I be worried about those?" "This planet," Trenzik interjected, his voice rising with the particular strain of someone explaining obvious danger to someone who should already be dead, "has radiation levels 7 times habitable parameters. The soil is toxic. The atmosphere is compromised. Tectonic instability threatens structural integrity. Water sources are contaminated with compounds that dissolve organic tissue. Agricultural establishment is functionally impossible." Marcus nodded along, expression thoughtful. "Right, yeah, those were challenges initially. Hence, the hydroponic setup and the soil remediation protocols. Radiation shielding helped with the first issue. You folks left tons of it lying around, thanks for that. Tectonic stuff required some creative weight distribution, but that's just foundation engineering. Atmospheric processes were mostly intact, just needed proper calibration and maintenance. And the water," he gestured toward the purification systems, "just basic filtration and UV treatment. Nothing fancy." "Nothing fancy," Vash'kor repeated, his voice very quiet, which anyone who'd served under him would recognize as extremely dangerous. "You terraformed a dead world with salvaged military equipment and are describing it as nothing fancy. Terraforming is a strong word. I'm just farming." "Speaking of which," Marcus brightened considerably, "you folks hungry? Got some vegetables coming in nicely. First harvest was small, but we're optimizing yield with each growth cycle. Also got protein synthesis running last week, so actual protein instead of supplements. Game changer for morale." "Show us," Vash'kor ordered, because at this point he needed to see the full extent of this impossibility before writing any report that would determine whether he faced commendation or psychiatric evaluation. Marcus led them through the settlement with the enthusiasm of someone showing off a home renovation project. Every structure, every system, every carefully planned detail emerged from military salvage and human ingenuity combined in ways that violated several engineering principles Vash'kor had considered fundamental. The greenhouse occupied what had been a command bunker, its walls reinforced with layered viewport glass salvaged from destroyed vehicles. Inside, temperature and humidity held steady despite the hostile exterior environment. Tomatoes grew on vertical supports. Leafy vegetables filled hydroponic trays. Something that looked like potatoes occupied large containers of carefully treated soil. Marcus explained nutrient balance. pH levels and crop rotation with the casual expertise of someone who'd done this before. The viewport glass was brilliant, he said, adjusting an irrigation timer. Already rated for pressure differential and radiation resistance. Just needed proper sealing. That's military-grade materials for you, overbuilt for everything. The protein synthesis lab occupied a former weapons depot, its blast-resistant walls now protecting delicate equipment that produced nutritionally complete protein from atmospheric compounds and bacterial cultures. Marcus had converted artillery targeting systems into precision molecular assemblers. Ammunition storage racks held culture tanks. The whole facility hummed with productive efficiency. This was a weapons storage facility, Vash'kor observed, mandibles clicking with involuntary stress. Great bones, Marcus agreed cheerfully. Environmental controls already installed, power routing in place, and the blast resistance makes it perfect for containing pressure variations. Just had to sanitize everything and repurpose the control systems. Residential quarters occupied reinforced bunkers, their military austerity transformed through modifications that suggested humans required more psychological comfort than purely functional space. Common areas featured salvaged furniture. Personal quarters showed individual decoration. Someone had painted a mural on one wall depicting Earth landscapes, rolling hills, blue sky, actual clouds that suggested water vapor rather than chemical runoff. 43 people total, Marcus explained as they walked. 12 families. Mix of agricultural specialists, engineers, a doctor, couple of teachers for the kids. We put together a colonization collective after the war ended. Earth's overcrowded, colonies are expensive, and survey reports mentioned Zereth 9 had abandoned infrastructure. Course, those reports didn't mention the radiation and soil toxicity levels. That was a surprise. But we'd already committed, so he shrugged. Adapted. They emerged into the courtyard as if summoned by narrative convenience, and yes, there were more humans. Adults working on various tasks, someone repairing a water line, others tending a small garden, 2 individuals engaged in animated conversation while reviewing what appeared to be construction blueprints. Children, actual small humans in the larval stage of development, played some kind of game involving throwing an object and running. A community notice board advertised weekend market schedules, a vote on settlement naming Zia options, New Hope, Persistence or Henderson's Landing, and someone offering repair services in exchange for fresh vegetables. Vash'kor's scanner operator, who'd been quietly running environmental analysis throughout the tour, approached with the expression of someone whose scientific worldview was dissolving in real time. Sir, these humans are registering lower radiation exposure than our crew. Their atmospheric mix is cleaner than what we're breathing through filters. Soil toxicity in cultivated areas has decreased by measurable percentages. This is, she paused, searching for words, this shouldn't be possible. Yet, Marcus interjected helpfully, here we are. Possibility is funny that way. Vash'kor felt something inside his thorax that might have been an aneurysm developing. He'd commanded forces through 12 years of brutal combat. He'd made strategic decisions affecting thousands of lives. He'd filed reports documenting victory conditions and resource expenditure with meticulous detail. None of that had prepared him for explaining to command that humans had colonized a planet he'd officially declared hopeless using garbage and optimism. This planet is military property, he said, mandibles clicking with the authority of someone falling back on regulations when reality stopped cooperating. Condemned territory. Officially abandoned, yes, but still under military jurisdiction. Unauthorized colonization violates 7 separate treaties and at least 14 imperial regulations. Marcus's expression shifted to something that resembled sympathy combined with loyally confidence. Actually, under Galactic Salvage Protocols Section 7, Subsection 12, abandoned military assets revert to unclaimed status after 60 standard days without formal garrison presence. Which happened. He checked a datapad. 4 months ago. We filed preliminary colonization paperwork with the Galactic Settlement Administration 16 weeks back. Waiting on approval, but possession is 9/10 of recognition in these cases. You researched salvage law. Vash'kor said flatly. Thoroughly. Had a lot of time during transport. Also downloaded the complete Imperial legal database from the communication relay before it went offline. Very helpful. Did you know your military code has provisions for legitimizing civilian occupation of abandoned territories if said occupation demonstrates successful resource utilization? Section 973, Paragraph 4. We're hitting all the benchmarks. Trenzik made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. He's lawyered us with our own regulations. I prefer done my homework, Marcus corrected. But sure, that works. The scientific officer cleared her throat with the timing of someone delivering extremely inconvenient news. Sir, I've completed the full environmental analysis. The human settlement has reduced ambient radiation by 23% through strategic placement of shielding material. Soil remediation using introduced earth bacteria is actively converting toxic compounds into nutritionally viable substrate. 3 major tectonic fault lines have been stabilized through, she paused, rechecking her scanner, through strategic weight distribution using repurposed structure foundations. They've accidentally started terraforming through agricultural activity. How? Vash'kor demanded, directing the question at Marcus. Specifically, how did you stabilize tectonic activity through farming? Marcus brightened like someone who'd finally been asked about their hobby. Oh, that was tricky. See, the bombing campaigns created uneven mass distribution across several fault lines, increased pressure, higher likelihood of seismic events. So we calculated where additional weight would balance the pressure differential and built our heaviest structures, greenhouses, water storage, the protein lab, over those specific points. Added ballast where needed using reclaimed material. Basic civil engineering, really. Just applied on a larger scale. Just basic civil engineering, the scientific officer repeated numbly. They've accomplished what would require specialized geological intervention teams and years of surveying. We had blueprints of all the bombing sites from military databases, Marcus explained. Made it much easier to calculate existing conditions. Again, very helpful data access. Appreciate the thorough record keeping. Vash'kor stood in the center of this impossible settlement, surrounded by evidence that his professional assessment had been thoroughly, comprehensively, almost insultingly wrong. Humans, creatures barely into their own space age, relatively soft-bodied and mechanically fragile, had looked at a planet declared uninhabitable by advanced military analysis and simply built a village. Because nobody had told them it was impossible loudly enough to override their inclination to try anyway. What? He asked, with the weariness of someone whose entire career flashed before his eyes in the form of extremely awkward reports. Will you tell command? They're expecting confirmation that the beacon failed due to equipment malfunction on a dead world. Marcus considered this expression thoughtful. Well, that's technically accurate. Beacon did fail. We repurposed its power supply for the greenhouse climate control system. As for the dead world part, he gestured at the gardens, the playing children, the humans going about their afternoon with the comfortable rhythm of established routine. I'd say that's subject to interpretation. Vash'kor returned to his ship as Zereth 9's sun descended toward the horizon, painting the scarred landscape in shades of orange and purple that almost looked beautiful if one squinted and suppressed memories of artillery fire. The settlement's lights flickered on as darkness approached, street lighting converted from military searchlights, window illumination spilling from bunker quarters, the soft glow of greenhouses maintaining their controlled environments. Trenzik hovered nearby with the expression of someone waiting for orders that would determine multiple career trajectories. "Your report to command." Vash'kor stared at the planet below, watching the lights multiply as evening routines established themselves. Somewhere down there, humans were preparing evening meals from vegetables they'd grown in toxic soil. Children were being called inside structures built from military debris. Someone was probably still working on those construction blueprints, planning expansion, designing improvements, making the hopeless work through sheer refusal to acknowledge impossibility. "I will," he said slowly, "recommend that Command authorize a comprehensive resurvey of Zereth 9 in 5 standard cycles, to properly assess long-term habitability factors and determine whether civilian colonization protocols merit adjustment." 5 cycles, sir. That's time for proper scientific analysis, Vash'kor interrupted. "Can't rush these assessments. Might miss important data. Critical to be thorough." Trenzik's mandibles clicked with understanding. 5 cycles. Enough time for the humans to establish firmer legal claims, expand their settlement, and accumulate irrefutable evidence of successful colonization. Enough time for military bureaucracy to lose interest in a planet they'd already written off. Enough time for paperwork to get lost in appropriate ways. "Very thorough, sir," his second-in-command agreed. "I'll note that in my report as well. In the interest of scientific completeness, their vessel broke atmosphere as full darkness claimed the planet below. The settlement lights remained visible from orbit, a small constellation of determination against the scarred landscape." Vash'kor committed the image to memory, knowing that 5 cycles from now, those lights would have multiplied. The village would be a town, the farms would be extensive, and some other military officer would have to explain to Command why humans had colonized a dead world and made it work. Because that's what they did. Apparently. Looked at military certainty, tactical impossibility, and scientific consensus, shrugged, and planted tomatoes anyway. The General's last transmission, before jumping to hyperspace, consisted of 3 words, broadcast on the frequency Marcus's people monitored: "Good luck, farmers." He suspected they wouldn't need it. Luck favored those too stubborn to recognize when they should quit. And humans, he'd learned, excelled at selective deafness regarding impossibility. Somewhere on Zereth 9, in a greenhouse built from military salvage on soil, declared poisonous by expert analysis, tomatoes ripened under carefully regulated lights, while their gardener hummed contentedly and planned next season's crop expansion. The planet remained scarred, hostile, and absolutely unsuitable for habitation, according to every reasonable standard. The humans remained entirely unbothered by this assessment, which was really very characteristic of them, and the universe, displaying its characteristic sense of humor, continued rotating as if any of this made sense.